Hi, Cassandra. Welcome to Unbroken.
Hello, Alexandra. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh,
Thank you for
and
the invitation.
I'm so happy to have you here. I should have said your last name as well. It's Cassandra Ogier. And so, why don't you start by just telling us a bit about your background and then how you found the principles?
Yes, well, I'm an equine guided educator, which means that I work with horses to help support human development, which we'll go into a little bit more. But my background is as a coach in that modality and also as a registered three principles practitioner. And I run a company called The Reflective Horse. And we can share a little bit more about that, the reflection of the horses and our true nature. And I also run a teaching program that expands the Reflective Horse program out to uh, other facilitators being able to also share equine guided empowerment, as I call it. And it is very much an inside out based coaching modality that we thread all the way through the mastery teaching program.
Hmm.
So, that in a nutshell is it.
Oh, that's great. And how did you come across the principles? Do you remember?
Well, yes, I did. I remember really clearly. And when I was just contemplating your questions and thinking, you know, where did it sort of all begin for me? And so the actual point of me coming to the principles, what I was thinking about sharing was that um, it was like a developing of presence for me over years and years, and the horses at the beginning of my life really acted as a very solid presence in my life when there was a lot of chaos and confusion and not great things happening in my childhood. So I was always able to go to the horses. And what I obviously realized, as I grew up, was that they were fully present. And I wasn't that great with humans around then. And I didn't like school. And I really was, pushing against all of that. But really, my career ended up being present for humans. And I worked for 10 years, or a little more than 10 years, in the film industry in England, in the casting department. So putting actors in theatre and TV and film. And I was kind of contemplating, it was really about being present for people and helping them to understand that things weren't personal, because obviously in that industry you're being judged and you're being assessed and all of this kind of thing, and as a creative person who was bringing in the type of person we wanted for a role, within that I just did a lot of, I suppose, coaching in that way of helping people to understand it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the circumstances. um, and, then I had three sons, and that is all about presence, and bringing up children and, you know, having that flexibility. And then as my children grew up, I got reunited with horses. And I actually was running a very successful business in equine therapy or equine guided education. And I had a little bit of a distorted view of what being in service was at that time. And I worked with a lot of rehabilitation centers, again, with this idea that there is health and well-being, there in everybody, but it was kind of at the expense of myself and my well-being and me taking care of myself. So to the point of where I discovered the principles and that segue, I was kind of getting burnt out doing what I was doing. And I actually got so burnt out and didn't listen to my body that I had a cancer diagnosis in 2017. And it was actually a conversation with a 3 principles practitioner who is a health coach, Ellen, and she really started to point in the direction of what would it be like to just allow my feelings to pass through me. And that was the very beginning of, having going through this chemo and going through something that was so overwhelming, and I felt very hopeless, but I wanted to keep this positive outcome or outlook. And what I felt was, if I wasn't positive, that I was going to literally drown, in these feelings.
Mm.
And she basically allowed me the permission. What if you could just be present to those feelings and allow those feelings to flow through you? And it was in that moment that I, had an emotional release, and I was only talking to her on the phone. And
Mm.
after that, because I'd been holding on to so much, I felt this innate peace, like a deep peace within myself, for just having expressed myself, and it didn't last, and it passed through. And I started to kind of get this inkling, which kind of made a lot of other things make sense that I'd been thinking too hard about in the past.
Mm.
And that was really how it unraveled for me.
Mm.
And I started reading, a little bit more of Sydney Banks, and I think really I had heard the principles everywhere, and all the books that I'd read, and all of the teachers that are pointing in the same direction. But it always seemed to be something that I was striving for, that I was trying to attain somewhere. And what the principles really showed me was that it's not about that. It is, there is a human experience, and we're going to go in and out of, pushing feelings down and having them come up, and, allowing this flow to happen. So it really made sense to me in a way that multiple self-development and courses and retreats and God knows what had not really given me this clear understanding of, it's okay to be me,
Mm.
and that it's okay to go through these ups and downs, and that is the human experience, that we are kind of illuminated or enlightened in little windows, and then we forget, and then
Mm.
we come out again and we can see more clearly. And that it really is a dance like that, where I didn't have to put myself under the kind of pressure that I've been putting myself under before. So
Mm.
it allowed me space within myself just to be kind of way more trusting and accepting of really what was happening,
Mhm.
and that it was all okay. And henceforth, it's really given me such an enormous amount of trust. And that is, self-trust, but also trust in the unfolding of everything.
Mhm.
Like I have a plan, but, just to be really open and curious about what happens next, and not trying to drive it forward or make it happen. So there's that, balance of ease, which I feel the principles have allowed me to really integrate more into my everyday life.
Mhm. And I
Yeah.
imagine you pretty quickly saw, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that horses have that way of just letting their feelings, whatever's going on, just move through them very quickly and then move on.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely true. But I'd seen a lot of that, and I hadn't
Mm.
put those two things together really for myself. But
Right.
you're absolutely right that they're continuously allowing energy, any tension, to be released straight away. So they might be, you know, shaking their heads or kicking out or breathing out, that horse breath that we all know, and yawning and rolling on the ground. You know, they're literally just releasing tension almost as soon as any pressured situation happens, they are releasing. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That is one of the things that the horses show us is just let it go. And the other thing is, none of it's personal. None of it is personal. And in fact, I had a client who was here on the weekend, and she did a really just explained it so beautifully that the male horse had nipped at the female horse, and she squealed and like threw her leg up in the air and bucked, and then they both actually started like play kicking out at each other. Then they both walked off in different directions. She, you know, shook her head, yawned, and then went back to grazing. And what we were saying was that is our self-regulated place, is to go back to grazing, you know, to just recognize that we're taking things personally, you know, notice that that's happening, but the horses just are not doing that. There's absolutely no thought around, you know, if she does that again, or if he does this again, or whatever it might be, that the stories that we make up and take personally, when it's really just another person's experience and perspective that they're coming from. It's really nothing to do with us. So you're spot on there.
Well, and that's such a great example, because I imagine that once a horse gets back to a place where it can graze, that means that it has released any energy of tension, like you just said, because grazing is such a relaxed thing to do, and they're not on high alert at that moment. So yeah,
Yes.
that's a great example. Yeah.
Isn't it a great example?
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, because that is that thing about being in high alert and us not being able to settle in our human experience, you know, and feeling very like, I always think about it like the energy, it goes into the top half of our body when we've got any tension, you know, when we've got a lot of thinking going on. It's like we really are existing from the waist upwards, or the diaphragm upwards. And that out breath, you know, that back to grazing, is kind of allowing the energy to settle within us. And I know personally that somatic awareness, like embodied awareness, has really helped me with the principles. Because, you know, I just think that grounding for me is about being in my body and being able to listen to my body, and to self-regulate through really simple practices, you know, which I teach, but I have to remind myself that all the time, you know, to just feel my feet on the ground, to relax my butt cheeks, to have a relaxed belly, to, you know, just, I can feel it in my body when I'm talking about it, that it's like the weight of gravity is going to support my self-regulation. And so when I look at the horses, they are so solid in that way. You know, they've got 4 feet on the ground, they've got this very relaxed belly. They, you know, as you say, they have this beautiful tendency to just keep, you know, grazing when they're relaxed. And it reminds me how much tension we hold in the body and what is stored in the body. And not to say that, my experience is that any attention to the body and releasing is not just releasing in that moment, it's releasing so many things that we've built up over time. And we don't need to necessarily, maybe emotions will arise and feelings and thoughts will arise, but we don't have to really know what it's about. And the horses have definitely showed me that you know, we make up a story about a past trauma, or we want to relate it to something, that's because of this or that. But ultimately, I feel like just coming back into our body and into presence,
Mhm.
and the relaxing and releasing that comes with that is not only helping you in the moment, but it's also allowing just, the yogic word is samskaras, like it's just releasing tension that we don't even know where it came from, or
Mhm.
emotion that we might have stuck in the body, and that we can trust that, that we can trust that that can easily just dissipate and move through us without us having to know exactly what or why, which
Mhm.
is what our personal thinking wants to do, is to connect it to something.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good point. And I know for sure I have that tendency whenever a big feeling comes up, my mind will immediately make a big story about it. It's connected to this, as you said, and yeah, and it's happening
Yeah,
now
yeah.
because of such and such. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Our mind is like a computer in that way,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
it's wanting to make those assessments and feel right and justified, or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
Yeah, but you're, yeah, completely right that, just allowing it to be is so freeing. And ultimately, that was my entry point into the principles, was exactly that. It was like, I mean, I can't even remember what I was thinking, thankfully, but it was very hopeless, and like, when I'm, just whether or not I was going to make it through. But all it was just tension that needed to be released from my body. And then I felt completely different.
Hmm.
I mean, really, and moment to moment, just allowing myself to feel whatever that is. I'm sad, not why am I sad? I'm feeling sad. I did that this morning. I was thinking, you know, I feel sad, you know, okay, I feel sad. I went for a walk, I did a few things, I meditated. I don't feel sad now, you
Hmm.
know, but I could go into, oh, that must be this, or, it's probably that, and just kind of pulling myself into something that really isn't necessary.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so well said. Um, and so I want to ask then, what have you seen in this work and this I just love the combination that you have of the work with horses and the principles. And what have you seen about how the body can point us toward that innate well-being that's already there? Is there anything
Yes.
more you can say about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things that I can say. One is that, I think I want to go back to the body, that it doesn't mean we have to sit and meditate. It's just being okay with stillness. And maybe, nature is very helpful to, know how we're feeling in our body, just really checking in that all our muscles are relaxed. But that's it, that could be as simple as that. Just
Hmm.
to notice, like, oh, am I holding in my stomach, or am I got tension in my shoulders when I'm talking to you? And then also being aware of what's around me. So, in nature, that's so uh, open for, so many beautiful things. But just being aware of how we want to assess that, and how our brain wants to categorize everything,
Mm.
and just being in that stillness. So, I feel like that being in the body in that way is very, very helpful, to know that in this moment we're okay. Like, there is well-being, right, in this moment. That is well-being. And I think that we could get caught up in many, many things, but it's almost like that, even if it was just a minute or two, that awareness of being present in the body, being aware of, your environment, even if you're inside, it 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 creates a space where insight and creativity and understanding can come in.
Mhm.
And I think that, for many of us, it's hard to quieten that mind, but it could be minutes or seconds. And that in that time, it's just trusting that that really is a space that is not void of anything. It's actually where everything can come in. But if we've
Mhm.
got so much going on in our heads and we have so much tension in our bodies, then those insights or that creativity or whatever it is doesn't have room to come in. So we're taking it on for ourselves, like thinking that if we control it and we overthink, like, how am I going to do it? What if this, what if that? And we hold this tension in our body, there isn't really any space for the divine, if you want to call it, or God, or insight, spirit to come in.
Mhm.
And Michael Neal, I believe it was Michael Neal that said this. It's a wonderful. What I heard him say was, if you have a fan, like a wind fan, and you have it on top speed, and you throw a deck of cards at it, the cards are just going to bounce off and they're not going to go anywhere. But if you can slow down the fan and throw the cards, like one or two of those cards are going to get through. And I
Mm.
really love that metaphor.
Mhm.
That is, and for me, that takes a quietening of my system
Mhm.
to be able to, that feels like cards can get through. It
Right.
feels like that those insights have got a space to come through. But we're
Mhm.
really used to driving everything
Mhm.
and making things happen, and not usually giving the opportunity for that deep trust to actually bring something to us.
Mhm. And
I
one
don't
of
know
the
if I
things
answered your question actually, but
No, I think you did. Yeah, that was beautiful. And one of the things that I learned when you and I worked together a couple months ago was,
Mhm,
I felt like I was sort of a walking head a lot of the time, not very connected to my body um
mhm,
so I love what you're saying about that space that it creates when we do make that connection. And you mentioned earlier about the energy and how it can be, here up high, or then we can let it settle. And I shared with you when I was with you, to me, it seemed like there was water in a balloon. And the water, if you squeeze the bottom, it gets squished all up to the top. But you can do it
yes,
the other way too and have it, go down in the lower parts of yourself, for lack of a better way to
yes,
say it. Yeah, yeah.
yes,
And
yeah,
that just that quietness when we do that, and that kind of trusting in who we are and what and our presence too, I mean, horses don't just have presence, we do as well.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, and I'd love to just share, with the horses, I feel like, um well, not I feel like, what I've come to know is, especially with larger groups of horses, like wild horses, and I'm talking about free roaming horses, not horses that are, you know, separated or, under the control of a human. But
Mm,
when you have them in their natural environment, they want every member of that herd to be self-regulated, because it doesn't feel in balance when they're not.
mm,
So they're kind of pushing us to self-regulate in a way. It's very subtle because it doesn't have an agenda behind it, but they're wanting to know, like, who are you? Like, where do you fit in to
mm,
this dynamic? And all it is energy. It's just an energy dynamic. But when it feels out of balance, they don't feel comfortable. So they have tension in their body. If one horse is, thinking there's a mountain lion on the hill, that energy will inspire them to move as a collective. And so when they're at peace and they're grazing, they are self-regulated. So what happens when we're around them is that we kind of just fall into that self-regulation. And there are all kinds of scientific studies about heart math and, you know, energy of bigger animals, especially horses, that we're in an energetic field, and we can feel it. I mean, it's amazing. You know, people really quieten down, and there's that sort of sense of staring into the middle distance, you know, where I was always told like that was not a place that you want to be. Like, remember in your at school and you're just gazing out of the
Oh.
window and you're in this beautiful world and they're like, hey, you know, come back here, you know, pay attention. But what I've come to learn and what I've learned from the horses is like it's this beautiful space of presence. You're not daydreaming, you're just present. And so it's very interesting, and I learned this very early on in the principles when I sat with Dickon and a couple of other wonderful people, Natasha Schwerdloff and Rahini, and we were answering questions at the end of the retreat, and I put my hand up and I said, I think this stuff is contagious. And Dickon said to me, yeah, it's a feeling. It's contagious. And that is the thing with the horses is, you know, many of us probably don't even know what self-regulated feels like. And as you said, you know, that you felt like a lot of your energy was up here and in your head. And it's almost like the horses teach us, or they help us remember what it was like, because at some points in our lives we did feel that sense of deep peace, sense of regulation, and they just remind us about that. So they almost have us being in that place, and then we remember. And for me, that is where the innate well-being and the understanding of our innate well-being comes in, because it's like when you're there, you're like, oh my God, this is it. Like, this is a beautiful feeling. And then that just carries on. That feeling doesn't go away. And that's because in the way I see it is it's a somatic experience. It's an experience that you've had in your body, distinct from your mind. Your mind has got nothing to do with it. And so it might, you know, want to journal about it or like keep that, capture that. Of course, it's going to do that. But ultimately, that deep remembering in the body is where I believe we recognize our deep and innate well-being, that there's nothing to fix there. There's nothing to change. There's nothing to get right. There's nothing to achieve, you know, and that sense of peace is really where everything begins from.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. And given you brought Dickon up, one of my all-time favorite quotes is from him. And he said, this was in a webinar or something I was watching several years ago. Tension reminds me that I have everything I need. And when I first heard that, I thought, what does that mean? And it just seemed incongruous to me, but now it's my favorite thing ever, because our bodies always let us know when we've forgotten that we are peace and we are well-being. And that's how I interpret that quote anyway. I love it so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So if I'm understanding you and Dickon,
Yeah.
tension is an indicator of where your mind is at.
Yeah.
So if you feel tense, you recognize that in your body, you know that you're in thinking.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
your body is trying to just remind us that we've forgotten momentarily that actually we are peace, you know, and we are well-being. And that tension that shows up, if we notice it, it can be such an ally, because it lets us know where
Yes.
our thinking is at.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's so true.
Mm,
That's so great. Yeah.
yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. One of my favorites. Um,
Yeah.
and what we talked about the energy of horses, and one of the things I learned when I was with you that is that they know the difference, if a mountain lion is walking on a ridge and they can see it, they can tell
Hmm.
if it's hunting or if it's not, if its belly is full and it's just walking by. And
Yes.
and I don't really know what my question is about that and the horses. I guess it has to do with the fact that we live in an energetic world, and I think we discount that so often. And one of
Yes.
the things that I saw when I was working with you was that horses remind us of that and are constantly in that. They don't have a way to not be in that flow of energy awareness. And I love that about them.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it's a really, it's, well, they are reading intention, and that is for the safety of the herd. So they're
Mm,
able to pick up on the environment, like the energetic terrain of
hmm
the environment. And I think that you're absolutely right that we actually have the same ability, um, and how to how to allow that to be from a grounded place.
hmm
And I think that that's also what the horses show us. They're not hyper vigilant. They are aware, but they're grounded.
hmm
So they're very grounded, but they're awake, and they are 360 awake, but they're not in hypervigilance. So it's
hmm
interesting, isn't it, that ultimately wouldn't that would be my optimum, I suppose, is to be grounded and present in my awareness, and also aware of what's going on around me. Not in terms of anything predatory, but yeah, just aware of my environment. And I think that when we work together too, you'll remember that the horses, they're moving and acting in a very much larger energetic field than their actual body is. So their body is what, 5 foot long, 6 foot long, and they are living in a more expanded energetic field. And we notice that very, very similar to birds or fish, that when they move, they don't necessarily touch. They're actually moving, and you can see the space in between them, but they move each other through that energetic field. Um, so they are living in that the whole time. And I think that my experience as humans is that we're not fully living in that in our own energetic field. We've been very conditioned to, shrinking and acquiescing, and, saying, oh, sorry, we don't want to upset anybody. And we just allow things to happen to us, um, because we're not really aware of that more expanded sense of self. And as a culture, I think we're quite, diminished, and a lot of expansion is often posturing and ego. But if we were to be just aware of this expanded energetic field, um, it really reminds me of things like the words sovereignty and self-honoring, and centered in the self, and really beautiful kind of expanded ways of explaining us when we're feeling really, open, and, like a wider kind of field of experience. And the horses really push us into getting really in touch with that energetic field,
hmm
because they're going to bump into us if we're not in it.
hmm
Basically, if we're not showing, I have an expanded energetic field, and I mean that from a very not any kind of adversarial or dominant place. It's just like I am an expanded energy field too.
Mm-hmm.
And then they really respect that. And that is an amazing thing to experience, that without any thought or judgment, they are recognizing that expanded energy field, and they feel safe and they feel comfortable when we're in that space, when we've actually been able to embody that space. And that for me is just such an amazing gift, that they don't really respect us when we're in this very diminished or shrinking position. They actually pay attention and want to be around us and feel comfortable and want to be led by us when we're more expanded and we're aware of that. So that is how her dynamics work. And I think that that's really how human dynamics work too. That when we really are in that sense of self and it isn't coming from the ego, that we are safe and we are comfortable and we are, a good leader. And ultimately, I kind of feel like the horse is kind of like Dickon or Sydney Banks or, a guru.
Mm-hmm.
In a way. They are teachers in that way, because they want us to be in that space. They're really asking us to embody that space
Mm-hmm.
and to be who we really are,
Yeah,
our true nature.
yeah, your true nature, exactly. And I just had a really big insight or sort of an image, and it's that, that true nature when we're at our center is kind of in the middle. And when we don't know how to do that, we seem to swing to one side or the other. So shrinking, as you said, really pulling ourselves in and not, yeah, embodying that. And then the other way we do it is to, as you said, to be really in our egos and sort of aggressive. And you think of yeah, people who think they're leaders, or try to be a leader, but really they're just bluster and yelling and that kind of thing. And then there in the
Yes,
middle is that really true, centered, grounded place that doesn't have to show off and doesn't have to shrink.
yes. That is so true. And I feel like I really had that experience. I mean, I know that was within me for
Mm,
sure. And actually, I was working with a young man this weekend, and we talked about that there is this place of balance. But what we tend to do, if as exactly as you said, and my experience is that I, had acquiesced a lot and put other people first, and not really being very self-honoring. And then when I wanted to get my needs met, I came at it so aggressively because I didn't trust that I would be heard, because I'd
mhm,
gone from one end of, I literally had to go from this one end to the other. And it didn't get my needs met. And I felt so frustrated and so angry. And yeah, I would definitely come in super hot with what I wanted, rather than exactly just, I was not in that place at the time.
mhm,
um, and I know that that's how I approached. If I had to do something for myself and I had to ask for something that I wanted, it was hard. It was
mhm.
hard to do that, and it was almost like I had to gather that energy, which came out as like, bah!
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think that is very, very true, that we tend to flip from, one side of the pendulum to the other.
yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
can see in myself as you say that I've been exactly that same, yeah. Anytime, very acquiescent and until a moment when, as you say, I needed to get a need met. And then, yeah, just very aggressive and dysregulated,
Yeah.
and yeah. Oh, it's
Yeah.
so
God, me
fascinating.
too.
Yeah.
That dysregulation. And it's like that phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back, when you're
Yes.
just like, Oh God,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure we've pretty much all been there, you know.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Probably.
yeah,
So I love, yeah.
and it's
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. I was really just going to say that um, the experience with the horses is almost finding that sweet spot, you know,
Yeah.
or somatic experiencing. Really, it's experiences in the body where you get to feel where that place is.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like working with couples, like pairs of people, because we can really test that out with each other and give each other incredible feedback of we do some somatic exercises, which really is about feeling into this expanded energetic field, and we probably did a few of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to kind of feel when you might be a little bit too much for the other person, and when you could step it up a little bit and be
Mm,
a bit more assertive. And so we can really help each other. And I think that happens in relationship where there's more balance and more harmony, that ultimately, hopefully, we could be in a place where we would say, you know we could help the other person to feel into that regulated place.
mm,
But I think that the horses really help us to, because they aren't going to move unless they feel that expanded energetic field.
mm.
They're just going to be standing there and they're going to keep on chewing the grass. So they're pushing us to mean that, to be like, no, this is from a neutral place and not getting tension in the body about it, but in a relaxed way, just saying like, no, this is my space.
Mhm.
And then they're like, okay, I see that. Yeah, very neutral.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely can't fake it with a horse.
No. Mm-mm.
Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
I could chat to you forever, Cassandra. It's just lovely. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about where we can find out more about your work? And I know you have a work retreat coming up shortly after this
Mm-hmm.
episode comes out. So tell us about that as well.
Yes. Yeah, I'd love to. So my website is thereflectivehorse.com, and you can find out about programs and, kind of a little bit more about the background of my work. And we have a retreat coming up, which is actually very special. And it's March the 31st till April the 2nd. And it's in San Juan Bautista in California. And it's actually at a wild horse sanctuary. It's magnificent. It's 4,000 acres and 525 wild horses. And I'm
Wow.
partnering with a wonderful woman, Natalie Benway, and we are facilitating a 3-day retreat, which will go into, this the somatic practices and being with the horses. And what's very interesting about these horses is that most of them, you can't even touch them. They are wild.
Mm,
So it's very much about communicating without the normal things that we would do. So making connections and communicating in a non-verbal way and really kind of honing into our intuition. And
mm,
we've called it moved by wonder, living in awe, because when we've gone there, we are just like, wow, it's very expansive. So
mm,
that is coming up. And yeah, there's a couple of other things coming up in May and June. One of them is an offering with Brad Gallup, who is also a
mm,
Three Principles practitioner,
mhm,
and he's also an equine guided educator. So we're going to do something together. I can't remember the exact dates, but it's around about May the 6th and 7th, and that's going to be in Malibu at Our Way, which is where I'm based at the moment.
mhm.
So yeah, those are the things that kind of come to mind that you all might be interested in.
Great. Well, I will put links and mentions in the show notes as well for anyone who's interested.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
My
there's an
pleasure.
events page on the website, and there'll be a few things
Okay,
on there.
great. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with me here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. It's a great pleasure.
Bye-bye.